The morning air was brittle with frost, seeping through the cracks of the wooden shack where Jiang Min and his family lived. His stomach had been awake long before he opened his eyes, gnawing and twisting as if some wild animal clawed inside him. Hunger was his alarm clock, his constant companion. It had been days since he had eaten more than a handful of boiled corn kernels. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake his younger sister, Haijin, curled up in a thin blanket beside him. Her breathing was shallow, her ribs visible beneath her pale skin. Their mother had stayed awake most of the night, tending to her, whispering reassurances she herself did not believe. The town outside stirred with the hollow rhythm of survival. Neighbors shuffled past their shack, some dragging sticks for fire, others heading toward the ration station where everyone knew there would be nothing left by the time they arrived. The ration system had long since collapsed, but still, the people lined up out of habit. Hope was hard to kill, even when it was foolish. Jiang Min pulled on his threadbare jacket and stepped outside. The sky was gray, the kind of color that seemed permanent over North Korea. He walked toward the abandoned fields at the edge of the village, eyes scanning the frozen ground for edible roots or stray grains of corn left from the harvest months ago. But Korean soldiers often patrolled there, cracking down on food theft, as if starving men and women were criminals rather than victims. His breath quickened when he spotted a shape in the soil, half a turnip, shriveled but real. He dropped to his knees, scraping dirt away with his bare fingers, but a bark of laughter cut through the still air. Two Korean soldiers stood at the edge of the field, rifles slung casually across their shoulders. Dog One sneered. Scavenging again? Jiang Min froze, heart pounding. He wanted to beg, to explain, but words could be dangerous. The soldier kicked the turnip into the dirt and raised his rifle, but in warning, Jiang Min bowed quickly, stammering apologies, backing away. The Korean soldiers laughed as he retreated, their amusement crueler than the hunger in his stomach. By the time he reached home, his hands trembled from both cold and humiliation. His mother sat in the corner, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Nothing," she asked softly. He shook his head. Silence filled the room, broken only by Hijin's faint cough. Jiang Min looked at her fragile body and felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. Each day was the same. Hunger, fear, humiliation. Each day survival seemed less like living and more like waiting for death. As night fell, he lay awake listening to his mother's shallow breaths. He thought of his father taken years ago, never returned. He thought of the Korean soldier's laughter, the cold in his sister's bones. Above all, he thought of the walls closing in around them. And a single word took root in his mind, dangerous and impossible, yet impossible to ignore. Escape. The nights in Jiang Min's village carried a silence heavier than sound. It was a silence woven with fear, where even whispers could become weapons. The walls were thin, and the neighbors' ears were sharp. Every family knew that one careless word could condemn them all. Jiang Min sat by the dim glow of a dying candle, staring at his mother's hollow face. She worked at a factory that barely functioned. Her wages paid in scraps of cornmeal or nothing at all. Each day she returned home, shoulders stooped, lips pressed tightly together as though keeping secrets from spilling out. Secrets were dangerous things in North Korea. That night, however, her silence cracked. She glanced at Haijin, asleep in the corner, then leaned closer to her son. "I heard something today," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A man at the factory. He said some villagers escaped, out across the river." Jiang Min's heart lurched. Escape. The very word was a forbidden fruit, poisonous if spoken too loudly. His mother's eyes darted toward the door as though the walls themselves were listening. "He said there are ways smugglers who can guide people to China, but it costs money." Money. That single word crushed the fragile flame of hope. They had nothing, no valuables, no savings, not even enough food to last the week. Jiang Min clenched his fists, frustration burning inside him. Later that week, he wandered into the town's market, a patchwork of stalls where desperate people bartered whatever scraps they had. The market smelled of boiled weeds and burnt corn husks. Old women sold homemade soap, while men whispered about Chinese goods smuggled across the border. It was there Jiang Min overheard the voices. Two men leaned against a wall, speaking low. One mentioned the smugglers, how they demanded payment in rice, foreign currency, or even clothing. Another warned of spies planted to lure the desperate into confessions, only to vanish into the grasp of the security police. Zhang Min lingered just long enough to catch one crucial detail. The smugglers disguised themselves as traders and met people by the river on moonless nights. That evening, as he trudged home, he found Hygiene sitting outside, coughing weakly into her sleeve. The sight tore at him. If nothing changed, she wouldn't last another winter. For the first time, the thought of escape hardened into determination. But determination was dangerous. He had no money, no plan, no like a gnawing hunger, and a family slipping through his fingers. As he lay on the wooden floor that night, Zhang Min closed his eyes and imagined the river. Black, wide, endless. On the other side was China. Freedom, food, life. He pictured Hai-Jin running through a field of rice, his mother smiling without fear. The images were fragile, fleeting, yet they burned brighter than the candle flame beside him. For the first time, he allowed himself to dream of leaving. And for the first time, he was willing to risk everything. The snow had begun to melt, leaving the ground damp and muddy. In the village, spring was not a season of renewal, but of hunger, last year's harvest long gone, the next still months away. Families survived on wild grass and tree bark, their faces gaunt, their movements slow. For Zhang Min each day felt heavier. His sister's cough deepened, his mother's eyes dulled. Every glance at them was a reminder. Staying meant death. The word escape throbbed in his mind, louder with each passing hour. He began watching the Korean soldiers more closely. To their routines, their checkpoints, their careless moments when they laughed and drank instead of paying attention. He noticed how the border patrol changed shifts near the river, how their boots crunched on the frozen soil as they marched. Every detail became a thread he tried to weave into a plan. But plans required more than observation. They required allies. Late one afternoon, Zhang Min returned to the market, his stomach gnawing at him like a starving animal. Among the ragged stalls, he found an old acquaintance, Guang Ho, a boy from the next village who had once worked in the coal mines. His eyes were sharp, his posture restless, like a man always ready to bolt. When Zhang Min mentioned the word escape in the faintest whisper, Guang Ho's gaze snapped to him hard and suspicious. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the mutter of traders. Then Guang Ho leaned closer. "There are smugglers," he said quietly. "They'll take you across, but you need to pay. Food, money, clothes, something valuable." "I have nothing," Zhang Min admitted, shame burning his cheeks. Guang Ho smirked bitterly. "Then you'd better find something, or they'll leave you behind. Worse, they'll sell you out." That night, Zhang Min scoured their tiny shack for anything of worth. An old brass spoon, cracked shoes, his father's worn jacket. Pathetic offerings, yet to him, they felt like treasures. When he showed them to his mother, her face twisted with fear. "You're serious about this?" she whispered. He nodded. Tears welled in her eyes, but she said nothing more. She understood. Perhaps she even shared the dream, though fear sealed her lips. Over the next week, Zhang Min bartered for scraps in the market, hoarding tiny treasures. A half bag of rice traded for 2 nights of work. A broken silver hairpin, once worn by a soldier's wife. Every piece felt like a step closer to freedom. But shadows trailed him. In the marketplace, he noticed strangers watching too long, lingering at the edges. Whispers spread quickly, and whispers killed. One evening, Guang Ho warned him, "Be careful. Security police plant men in the market. They listen for fools who talk too much. One wrong word and you vanish." Zhang Min's chest tightened. He had already said too much. He was already in too deep. But the plan was taking shape. And once a plan takes root in a starving man's mind, it becomes stronger than fear. The village was restless that spring, though no one dared to say why aloud. Rumors slithered through the Alice executions at the mines. Families vanishing in the night, a man shot for hoarding rice. Fear was as constant as hunger, yet fear also sharpened Zhang Min's resolve. If he stayed, he would die slowly. If he fled, he might die quickly. The choice to him was no longer a choice at all. Still, he had nothing to offer the smugglers at least, nothing that would buy his passage. That was when the thought struck him like lightning. Korean soldiers had everything: food, clothes, cigarettes, even money. And Korean soldiers were arrogant, careless with their abundance. One night, as the moon hid behind thick clouds, Jongmin crept toward the barracks on the village's edge. The air smelled of kerosene and sweat. Laughter carried through the open window where a group of young Korean soldiers drank soju, rifles tossed carelessly into the corner. Jongmin's heart hammered. He had no weapon, only desperation. But desperation was sharper than steel. He slipped into the shadows behind the storage shed. Through a crack in the boards, he saw uniforms, hanging jackets, boots, even a cap marked with the red star of the regime. His breath caught. A soldier's uniform wasn't just clothing, it was power. It could grant him movement, authority, invisibility.
Ow.
If he could take one, perhaps the smugglers would accept it as payment, or perhaps he could use it himself. But touching it meant death if caught. Every nerve screamed at him to run, yet hunger and fear pushed him forward. He slid the door open just enough to squeeze through. Inside, the smell of sweat and mildew was suffocating. His hands shook as he reached for a jacket. The fabric was heavy. Of course, the red star patch rough beneath his fingers. He stuffed it beneath his shirt, every heartbeat echoing like a drum. Then a voice, "Who's there?" Jongmin froze. A soldier's footsteps approached the shed. His throat closed, his legs refused to move. In that instant, he thought of his sister coughing, his mother's hollow eyes, the river that could carry them away. That vision jolted him into motion. He darted through the back, stumbling over the mud as the soldier's flashlight sliced through the dark. Shouts erupted behind him. "Stop, thief!" Jongmin ran harder than he ever had, his lungs burning, his legs quivering. The stolen uniform weighed him down like iron, yet he clung to it. Shots cracked through the night, echoing off the hills. Bullets bit the air but missed their mark. Last, he tumbled into the safety of the forest, collapsing against a tree. His chest heaved, his body trembled, but the jacket was still clutched in his arms. For the first time, he held something that could change everything. But as he pressed the uniform against his chest, a chilling thought gnawed at him. What if this theft bought him more danger than freedom? The uniform lay folded beneath Jongmin's straw mat, hidden like a forbidden treasure. Each night he touched it, half in awe, half in terror. If the Korean soldiers discovered it missing, they would search house by house. A uniform wasn't just property, it was the regime's skin. To steal it was to spit in the marshal's face. But hunger pressed harder than fear. His sister's ribs jutted like bars of a cage. His mother's voice grew faint. In the village market offered only weeds and empty promises. The uniform was his only bargaining chip now. At dawn, Jongmin sought out Kwang Ho. The other boy's eyes widened when he saw the folded jacket and cap. "You're insane," he whispered, his face pale. "Do you know what they'll do to you if they catch you with this?" "Yes," Jongmin said simply. "That's why I need the smugglers. Take me to them." Kwang Ho hesitated, then agreed. That night they walked the dirt path that wound toward the mountains, where the air smelled of pine and secrecy. Torches flickered in the distance. There, in a ruined barn, the smugglers waited. They were not the romantic outlaws Jongmin had imagined. Their faces were hard, their eyes colder than steel. One chewed sunflower seeds, spitting shells onto the floor. Another sharpened a knife idly, watching Jongmin like a predator sizing up prey. "What do you have to pay?" the leader asked, his voice rough as gravel. With trembling hands, Jongmin unfolded the uniform. The smugglers leaned forward. A ripple of interest passed among them. The leader picked up the jacket, rubbing the red star patch between his fingers. "This is dangerous," he muttered. "Too dangerous. Korean soldiers lose rifles, cigarettes, even boots but a uniform? They'll scour the whole province." Still his eyes narrowed. "It's valuable." Jongmin's heart raced. "Will you take me across the river?" The smugglers exchanged glances. Finally, the leader smirked. "We'll consider it, but you'll need more. It's food for the journey, a blanket, money, if you can find it." "I have nothing else," Jongmin whispered, despair creeping into his voice. "Then you work," the leader said coldly. "You work for us until you've paid enough." And so Jongmin found himself hauling sacks of contraband at night cigarettes. Liquor smuggled from China, his back aching, his fingers raw. The smugglers never smiled, never thanked him. They treated him as disposable, another desperate villager willing to risk everything for the illusion of hope. Yet every night, as he staggered home, he told himself, it was worth it. Each sack he carried, each bruise he earned, was one step closer to freedom. But deep inside, a seed of doubt took root. He had seen the smuggler's eyes, cold and calculating. Men like that did not deal in hope, they dealt in profit. And profit often demanded betrayal. The mountains grew darker with each passing night, the paths slick with mud from spring rains. Zhang Min's hands were blistered raw from hauling sacks for the smugglers, yet still they demanded more. Another run, they ordered, faster this time. His back ached, but he bit his tongue. He couldn't risk angering them. One evening, after a long haul of rice, Zhang Min collapsed outside the barn where the smugglers gathered. Their voices drifted through the half-rotted walls. At first he thought nothing of it, until he heard his name. "The boy with the uniform," one smuggler muttered. "He's desperate enough to sell his soul," another laughed. "Perfect bait." Zhang Min's pulse quickened. He pressed his ear closer to the wall. The leader's voice cut through the others. "We'll take him near the crossing, make him believe he's safe. Then we deliver him back to the Korean soldiers. They'll pay well for anyone foolish enough to escape, especially one bold enough to steal a uniform." Laughter followed, low and cruel. Zhang Min's stomach twisted. Betrayal. He had given them his sweat, his body, his hope it all along. They had planned to sell him back to the very men he fled. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay awake on his mat, staring at the roof beams of his crumbling hut. Every creak in the dark felt like footsteps coming for him. His mother stirred beside him, coughing softly. His sister whimpered in her sleep, clutching her belly, clenched his fists, torn between terror and fury. If he stayed with the smugglers, he would be dragged back in chains. If he fled alone, he risked drowning in the river or starving in the wilderness. Both paths led to death, but one held a whisper of freedom. The next day, when Kwang Ho came to fetch him, Zhang Min forced a smile. "Another run?" Kwang Ho nodded, but his eyes were troubled. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Zhang Min studied him carefully. Could Kwang Ho know? Or was he, too, a pawn in their scheme? As they carried sacks along the narrow path, Zhang Min leaned close. "You trust them?" he asked quietly. Kwang Ho didn't answer. His silence was louder than words. That night, Zhang Min made his decision. He could no longer depend on the smugglers or anyone. If he was to escape, it would be by his own courage, his own hands. He hid the uniform beneath his mat once more, smoothing the straw carefully to conceal it. Tomorrow, he would try to use it himself. No smugglers. No bargains. But the thought haunted him as he closed his eyes. If the smugglers discovered he was planning to slip away, they wouldn't simply sell him, they would kill him. The night was so still that even the crickets dared not sing. Zhang Min stood alone in the corner of his hut, staring at the uniform folded neatly on the floor. His hands trembled as he reached for it. The fabric smelled faintly of sweat and gun oil, the scent of power he had never possessed. One piece at a time, he dressed himself, the jacket first, then the trousers, the stiff belt, and finally the cap. When he looked into the cracked mirror, the reflection startled him. A soldier stared back, not the starving boy of the villages, but a figure cloaked in authority. His heartbeat thundered. Could this disguise truly carry him to freedom? He slipped out into the darkness, his bare feet crunching against frostbitten earth. The moonlight painted his path silver as he moved toward the military checkpoint at the edge of town, the last barrier before the outer zones, and beyond them, the river to China. Each step felt like a drumbeat of doom. As he neared the checkpoint, the shadows of the gate rose before him, tall, foreboding, flanked by two armed guards. Their rifles glinted under the lantern light. Zhang Min adjusted his cap, lowered his chin, and forced his stride into the rigid rhythm he had seen Korean soldiers use. "Stop!" one guard barked. "Identify yourself!" Zhang Min's throat tightened. He swallowed hard and saluted clumsily. "Comrade soldier," passing through, his voice cracked. The guards eyed him suspiciously. One stepped closer, squinting. "Unit number?" Zhang Min froze. His mind scrambled. He had never thought about unit numbers. Sweat trickled down his spine. He stammered, I was sent on orders." The guard's expression hardened. "Then you know the code." "The code?" Jiang Min's stomach dropped like a stone. Every soldier assigned to night patrols carried a rotating passcode, a word changed daily to catch imposters. He had heard whispers of it before, but he never thought it would be asked of him. "Comrade." The guard pressed, his rifle shifting slightly. "The code. Speak it, Ma." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Jiang Min's mind screamed for an answer, any answer, but his lips were numb. He could hear the blood rushing in his ears, could feel the walls of his plan crumbling around him. Behind him, another lantern flared. More footsteps approached the changing patrol. If he didn't act now, he would be caught between two groups of Korean soldiers. Jiang Min forced a laugh, trying to mask his panic. "Code," he said, feigning confidence. "Of course, comrade. I was only testing you." The guard's eyes narrowed. "Testing me." The second guard raised his rifle slightly. "Say the word." Jiang Min's hands clenched inside his sleeves. The uniform suddenly felt like a trap tightening around his chest. He was seconds away from discovery, from being dragged into the shadows of the barracks, beaten, tortured, executed, and he had no answer. The silence at the gate was suffocating. The guard's eyes bore into Jiang Min, rifles glinting under the lanterns. His lips were dry, his mind blank. He could almost feel the seconds slipping away, each one a noose tightening around his neck. "The code," the taller guard demanded again, stepping closer until Jiang Min could see the scar across his cheek. Now, Jiang Min's knees trembled. He thought of his mother's hollow face, his sister's weak cough, the wasted lives waiting for him at home. If he failed here, their suffering would continue. If he faltered now, all of it, every stolen grain of rice, every bruise, every risk, would be for nothing. His mouth opened, but no word came. "Imposter," the shorter guard growled. The rifle jerked upward, barrel aimed at Jiang Min's chest. Without thinking, Jiang Min lunged forward. His hand struck the lantern pole, sending it crashing into the dirt. Flames hissed as the oil spilled, plunging the gate into chaotic shadows. He shoved past the scarred guard, his shoulder slamming into the man's chest. Shouts erupted. "Stop him! Stop the traitor!" Bullets cracked through the night. Jiang Min sprinted, his boots thundering across the hard-packed ground. The stolen uniform betrayed him. Now it was too heavy, too loud. He tore off the cap and flung it aside, gasping as he vaulted over a ditch. Dirt sprayed where a bullet struck inches from his heels. Lanterns flared behind him. More Korean soldiers were giving chase, their voices carried across the night like hunting dogs. He stumbled toward the fields, the tall reeds swallowing him in darkness. His lungs burned, each breath tearing like glass. Still he pushed forward, deeper into the fields, his hands slapping stalks aside. But the uniform's insignia caught the moonlight. Another shout rang out. There, in the reeds, shots whistled overhead, snapping reeds in half. Jiang Min dropped to his belly, crawling desperately through the mud. His heart hammered so violently he feared they would hear it. Then footsteps. Heavy boots trampling closer. Lantern glow flickered against the reeds. Jiang Min's mind screamed for escape. He thought of running, but his legs were useless. He thought of surrender, but the image of iron bars and lashings froze his blood. Instead, he pressed his face into the dirt, his body trembling. The reeds thinned, giving way to the open slope of a hill. Beyond it, the land dipped into a dark basin where the river coiled like a serpent under the moonlight. The Yalu, wide, black, and merciless. Jiang Min stumbled down the hill, his chest tight with exhaustion. His stolen uniform clung to him like chains, heavy with mud and sweat. Every step sent fire through his legs. But the river pulled him forward, whispering promises of China, of food, of freedom. Behind him, faint shouts rose again. The Korean soldiers had realized the decoy was false. Lanterns bobbed in the distance, spreading out in the night. The hunt was closing. Jiang Min reached the riverbank and fell to his knees. The water was faster than he remembered, churning under the moonlight, waves breaking against jagged rocks. A bitter wind skimmed the surface, carrying the smell of ice and silt. His heart faltered. Could he survive this crossing? He thought of his mother again, her back bent over scraps of firewood, his sister's frail hand clutching his arm when she begged for food. He whispered their names into the night. "Amma, Sunhee, wait for me." He pulled off the jacket, tearing away the insignia that marked him as a soldier. The cold air stung his thin shirt, but he felt lighter, freer. He stepped into the shallows. The river bit into his skin instantly. It was like knives slashing his body, so cold it stole his breath. He gasped, teeth chattering violently. He forced himself deeper, pushing against the current. Behind him, dogs barked. Voices shouted from the slope. Lantern light began to flicker against the reeds. "No," Jongmin whispered, forcing himself into the deeper water. His arms thrashed, legs kicking. The current seized him, dragging him downstream. He coughed and spat river water, clinging desperately to his rhythm kick. Pull, breathe. A rifle cracked. The sound echoed across the water. A bullet struck with a hiss, spraying droplets inches from his arm. Another shot followed. Korean soldiers were at the bank now, rifles aimed, their shouts carried by the wind. Jongmin ducked under, letting the current drag him further before he surfaced, gasping. The world spun, the dark sky above, the endless water around, the shore slipping farther away. His limbs grew numb, his fingers barely obeyed him. He fixed his eyes on the far bank, China, a shadowy line of trees waiting in silence. Freedom was right there, if only he could hold on. Just a little more, he begged his body. His arms were lead, his legs trembled with each kick. The current spun him in dizzying circles. Behind him, the North Korean bank swarmed with Korean soldiers. Their lanterns glared like watchful eyes. The gunfire ceased. Perhaps they feared striking too far into China. But their voices sharp, furious echoed across the river, hunting him even here. Jongmin coughed, choking on icy water. His head sank once, twice. Darkness pricked at the edges of his vision. But the far bank was closer now. Branches stretched over the water like fingers offering a hand. He clawed forward, gasping, dragging his numb body toward them. And then, just as he reached for the roots jutting from the far bank, he heard it. A whistle, piercing, sharp, from the shadows behind the trees. China was not silent after all. Someone was waiting. The whistle cut through the river's roar, sharp and commanding. Jongmin froze, clinging to the exposed roots of the far bank. His chest heaved, his arms quivered, but the sound dragged him back to dread. Through blurred eyes, he saw figures move among the trees. Shadows stepped forward, men with flashlights that cut through the mist, beams darting across the water. Chinese words mingled with Korean, harsh and clipped. For a heartbeat, Jongmin's heart lifted. China, safety. Then the words sank in. Hand him over, quickly before he slips. Another flashlight hit his face. A voice, in perfect Korean, shouted, "Pull him up before the current takes him. He belongs to us. Regime agents." Jongmin's body turned to ice, colder than the river itself. He kicked weakly, clawing at the roots, desperate to climb up, to vanish into the forest. But rough hands seized his wrists, dragging him out of the water. His body collapsed onto the mud, trembling, coughing violently. The beam of a flashlight revealed their faces, 2 Chinese border guards, and behind them 3 men in plain dark coats. Their eyes were sharp, their posture too rigid to be ordinary civilians. North Korean security agents. One knelt and slapped him hard across the cheek. "Thought you could run?" the man hissed. His breath smelled of tobacco. No one escapes. Jongmin's mind spun. His body was too weak to resist as they tied his wrists with cord. His gaze drifted past them, to the forest just beyond. Freedom had been so close, trees that might have hidden him, paths that might have carried him deeper into China. Instead, the boots of his captors pressed him into the mud. The night faded into gray dawn as they dragged him back toward the Korean side. The sky lightened, revealing his failure in merciless detail. Korean soldiers on the bank cheered when they saw him, as though reclaiming a prize. Back across the river, Jongmin's body shook uncontrollably from cold and terror. Villagers gathered to watch, their faces blank, trained not to react. A commander barked orders, "Take him to the post, make an example of him." Jongmin's legs buckled, but the cords around his wrists cut deeper as they hauled him forward.
Ow.
He tried to think of his mother, his sister faces to hold on to, reasons to keep breathing. But all he could feel was the crushing certainty that he had not escaped. He had never escaped. As the sun rose over the bleak horizon, the gates of the detention post swung open. The smell of iron, smoke, and despair wafted out. Zhang Min stumbled inside, swallowed by the shadows of the regime he had tried to flee. The world outside China, freedom, life itself slipped away with the morning light. And for the first time, he felt the full weight of his country's truth. In North Korea, even the river could not carry you beyond its chains.